Robert Johnson's thoughts were foggy and disjointed. Dr. Wallace is an expert on endocrinology, and the heart is not a logical organ. Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig.
Hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of Star Trek The Original Series, Season 2, Episode 12, The Deadly Years, written by David P. Harmon, directed by Joe Pevney. We've heard his name before. This was December 8th, 1967. Where were you? How you guys doing today?
Good. December 8th, 1967.
So
I was not here.
Walter, you may have told us before, but can you please remind us what kind of a director or person was Joe Pevney? Because we see his name a lot.
Well, that's interesting that you should ask that, because Joe was probably one of the people who was most responsible for my being cast as Chekhov, because I had worked for Joe on an Alfred Hitchcock hour opposite James Caan, who I'd gone to school with. So it's all kind of combined. Joe was great. Joe was very amicable. He told me back in the Hitchcock days that he thought I had a great future ahead. He didn't know that he would be contributing to that future by being in the room when I auditioned for Star Trek. But yeah, I found him to be a delightful guy. I thoroughly enjoyed working with him.
Wow, cool.
In the second season of the series, they only used two directors, and they alternated. Joe Pevney and Mark. Why does his last name escape me?
It escapes me too. That's why I'm going to check real quick who it is. There's Ralph Sinensky.
Mark Daniels.
So Mark Daniels.
Yeah.
Got it. Wow. Yeah. Joe Pevney's everywhere in the second season.
Yeah. Every other episode.
You mentioned a lot of things there. The one thing I wanted to ask you about was Alfred Hitchcock Presents, because that was one of my favorite shows growing up, and I thought it was like Twilight Zone, so I always put it in the category of Twilight Zone. Can you talk a little bit about Alfred Hitchcock Presents and the legacy of that show?
Well, I think we were atypical. The story that we told on the Alfred Hitchcock Hour is not a reflective of the show in general. It was about a gang and a guy infiltrating the gang and being discovered. He's a writer and he wants to learn about it, and he's discovered that he's not really a gang kind of guy. They're very upset. They feel that he betrayed them. James Caan played the leader. James Caan played the writer. I played the leader of the gang. One of the interesting things is that the people who played my henchmen, Zalman King, Mark Slade, and Tony Musanti, all ended up doing their own series. Whoops. What's happened here?
Look at that.
Yeah.
There you are. Wow. There's Walter being the leader of the gang.
Oh, wow.
And Zalman King is on my right. Tony did a series called Toma, I think. And Zalman did a series called The Young Lawyers. Coincidentally, I also read for the same part that Zalman played in the Young Lawyers. He got the part. He did the series. He did a very good job. And Tony was a terrific actor. And Mark Slade was the third member of the gang. His part wasn't as significant as the other two guys, but he played a character called Blue in a Western. Yeah, there's Jimmy Caan.
Wow.
And
Wow.
with his back to you is Tony Musanti. Yeah, they were my henchmen.
James Caan. That is a very young James Caan right there.
James Caan was the character that the writer of the episode, Harlan Ellison, who is in the top left-hand corner with the collar turned up. He was the writer. That's Harlan. And Jimmy was fashioned after Harlan. But in any event, yeah. So that's how I got to know Harlan. That's Jimmy. That's some bald-headed guy who looks. That was Mark Slade. He's not in the picture now. If you just keep going. Yeah, okay. In the bottom picture with the 1, 2, 3, 5 people, the guy. Whoops, you're losing it. Bring him back. Bring back. Yeah. Okay, hold it there. Now you see Jimmy Caan in the foreground, just
yes.
the head and shoulders. Then there's a girl behind him, and behind the girl is Mark Slade, who played a character named Blue, and I think it was High Chaparral. So he had his series too. It was interesting that three of the guests, three of the hoodlums, all got television series, and of course James Caan had a very significant career, playing everything from The Godfather on down.
Yeah.
Wow. And I went to school. We went to drama school together. That's how I met him.
Wow.
I remember one very interesting, one funny thing. The four of us, Tony, Zalman, Mark, and Jimmy and I were getting ready to do something together. Change or something. And we were all in the room together and we're talking about who was the toughest guy. And Jimmy said, he pointed to, I think it was Mark, who had these really colorful sneakers. And he said, he's got to be the toughest. Because you couldn't wear those sneakers unless you were very, very tough.
It's like a boy called Sue, basically, right?
Yeah, Boy Called Sue.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just a little background. Harlan Ellison wrote City on the Edge of Forever.
Exactly. Yeah, the big one. The best episode that from the first year, from the first series, Star Trek series. At least I thought so, with Joan Collins, and it was a very touching episode. And he wrote that.
We got to go back and watch the first season at some point.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people really love the first season. They say the first season and second season were very good. Third season was hit and miss, it seems like, on a lot of episodes. So this episode, I felt like there were some hit and miss moments within this episode, and I couldn't quite get a feel for how much I liked it, because there were a few things that I thought were strange, and then a few obvious themes that I thought were great. And I'd never seen it before. But Walter, you were all over this episode, which was awesome. It was great to see. Do you remember shooting it at all? And do you remember enjoying it?
Yeah, I do. It was fairly early on. The character was distinguished by the fact that he didn't grow old while everybody else did. When I was shooting it, I was a little hesitant about this, about the the idea of why I didn't grow old. I mean,
Huh.
you know, I got scared. I got scared by looking at a dead person. Now, that is that, you know, he was not a squeamish character, Chekhov. He had, you know, we could assume that he had been in these dire circumstances where people were killed and all
Hmm.
sorts of things. So I
Yeah,
didn't.
Chekhov saw dead people a bunch of times in episodes. That was one of the things that kind of jumped out at
My
me too.
feeling was when we were shooting it, that it was going to kind of tough to buy the idea that, and the whole premise was that because he was scared, he had a surge of adrenaline, and that the adrenaline counteracted the aging process, so he didn't age. So the time when we were shooting it, I thought it was kind of a weak idea. But when I watched it, I bought it. When I watched it last night, and he gets scared by seeing this old person, I said, "Yeah, that's okay. I can buy that. I can buy, even if he is battle weary and a veteran and all of that. Under those circumstances, he looked pretty grotesque. The dead person, yeah."
Hmm.
And that didn't bother me as I thought it might. What I thought was, this was not a plot show. This was a character show, and it was about how you deal with something as significant as a metamorphosis, a physical metamorphosis. And this is what I think distinguishes Bill Shatner from a lot of people who play leading roles on television series. You know that he's a stage actor when you watch this, because I mean, God knows the man did have an ego, but but he was he was totally prepared to go with what was demanded of the character. And if he was grumpy and unpleasant, he bought it. And he played it, and was totally loyal to the written word. And
Hmm.
I thought that was the mark of a good actor. There is one thing, and I'm going to mention it now, even though it's not necessarily the right moment for it, that we shot, but and I saw it. I saw it when it was first screened, but it wasn't in this edition. And that is, as he is getting better, as he is improving, you catch him walking in the corridor, and he keeps walking past these big columns or posts. And each time you walk past it, he's less old. You know, it's something they used to do in black and white movies, you know, and that's how they got him back to the point where he's himself again. They didn't show that at all in the version we watched last night.
Did
He
you ever
went,
see that version? Was that ever there, or just did it never even make it?
yeah, I did. The first, when they screened it initially, when they screened it originally back in the day, they had you see him
Really?
go past these columns, less white, less bent over. Each time he becomes less an old man and more himself. I don't know why they did that. I
I
don't know
guess
why
they had to fit into the 50-minute television structure, and I guess they felt like they needed to cut out that scene. I mean, if we're going to talk about
that's
if they're going to
probably
talk
what.
about 20 seconds they could have cut out, I would submit the court hearing, because personally,
yeah.
I mean, maybe I'll get into that a little later, but I would have liked to see him switch. I can see how it's not necessary for the story. We get that he became young, but that would have been cool to see. It would have been
It
fun and
would
interesting to
be
see.
cool.
Yeah. And good music behind it, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to respond to a few of the things that you were talking about, Walter. For one, for the believability of your character being shocked, what added value to that for me as the viewer was the transition from going from outside into the dark cave. So it's kind of like walking into a dark room, not expecting to see something, and then being shocked by what you see. So I felt like the way they shot that from the interior, looking out as you walked into the dark cavernous cave, allowed us to visualize this dark space that you were walking into. So that lent something to me. And also, I wanted to highlight Joseph Pevney directing a movie called Man of a Thousand Faces. And Walter was talking about the black and white stuff, and um, that movie is a black and white film that has a lot of makeup in it, which is consistent with this particular episode as well. Just all the characters being aged in makeup. Um, and I want to also speak to the point you made about seeing Shatner as a stage actor and how his performances resonate like that. When I watched him, for example, in this episode, there was a moment on the planet's surface where he was flanked by Spock and McCoy. And while their eyesight was directly focused at him as captain, so they were, their speech was directed towards him. He has a thing where he looks out into the vastness and speaks kind of like he's speaking on a stage, where some of his lines are delivered directly at somebody, but when at certain moments he chooses to kind of deliver lines outward, like as if he was standing on a stage.
Yeah.
So he's not talking directly to Spock or directly to McCoy. He's actually kind of, what I see out there is a world in which, and it's kind of like out there to the camera. And I think that's one of the things that I pick up on his performances. I wanted to ask about the makeup in this one. What was the feeling like on the set with everybody being aged into this makeup? Was there discomfort behind it? Was there a playfulness that everybody was having on the set, or was it just business as usual?
Well, everybody was very professional, as I recall. And I think particularly Bill made a concerted effort to incorporate the aging process, what it did to him psychologically as well, and I applaud him for that. That's what I mean when I say that his stage background, there was integrity in the performance. He didn't try to. He wasn't worried about not being the leading man for those 20 minutes or 25 minutes. He was totally absorbed in being that character, and that character had, there was negativity to him. He was grumpy. He was difficult to be around, defensive, and I feel good for him. He really abides by the rules as an actor. He wasn't trying to be the star. He was absorbing that character, the aging of that character, and I thought he did a very good job at doing it. That's the thing about Shatner. On several occasions, you saw something that a lot of actors who are handsome leading men might not have done. But he was willing to give himself, even if it meant becoming unpleasant, to watch. But it was true to the character, and I admired that. He never shied away from the character's faults or the circumstances, situation. He was prepared to do whatever it required.
That came up in my mind about midway through the episode, what you're saying, Walter, which is when people started to age, right? Scotty shows up, he's a mess. Bones is starting to look haggard, so is the young lady. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. And I noticed that Shatner did not have any aged makeup on him yet. He had a couple streaks of white in his hair. And my first thought was, oh my God, I wonder if Shatner's just going to say, no makeup on don't ruin my beautiful face. You can wipe my hair. I'll hunch over. I'll talk with a more gravelly voice. And I started putting in my notes, I was like, why doesn't Shatner have any? But as the episode progressed, they did ugly him up. They did age him. And I said, okay, cool. I thought for a second he might have like pulled a little weight and said, you're not messing with my moneymaker here. But no, to your point, he went with it.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, and he needs to be commended for that. I mean, that's what you would expect
Yes.
from any actor. But when you're a leading man, and everybody is sort of genuflecting to you, it can be seductive, and you can just not want to do anything but be the leading man. But he was always prepared to go wherever it was demanded in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was, I mean, it's what we should all do, but It's not people always do,
And speaking of genuflecting, I believe in this episode, oh, sorry, go ahead, Walter. I was saying that speaking of genuflecting, people in this episode were octogenuflecting.
What does that mean?
It was a joke on octogenarian, but it didn't work. So the young lady's name was Lieutenant Galway. That was her name. And here's a question for you guys, since you guys are our resident biologists. When they said she was younger, but she aged faster because she had a higher metabolism, is that a real thing? I've never heard of that. People with a higher metabolism age faster?
Did they say that?
Yeah, that's what Bone said. He said, she's aging faster because she has a higher metabolism.
And, it sounds like it's something that could
work.
We're dealing with science fiction, so something like that, I wouldn't even question and say, yeah, right. I mean, just let it go. I mean, if we can have phasers on stun, we can have a higher metabolism.
Maybe you're right.
The only physical thing that bothered me was DeForest's hairpiece. It was such a phony hairpiece.
With the piece that was hanging down.
Oh, God. Yeah. I could almost see the clips.
Yeah, I was a little upset with Shatner's hairpiece. I was more upset with Shatner's hairpiece. The way the coloration of it was, it didn't seem consistent with his other hair. I'm like, why is it so much browner on the top and grayer on the sides? It didn't make sense to me. I don't know. Would you be aging and also dyeing your hair in the
just in a streak?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that was the style back in the 2200s. Maybe that's just a thing that they did.
Back in the
But you know what? We're going to jump to our break in just a second here. And then when we get back, I do want to talk about something that I don't know. Maybe you guys can talk me off the cliff on this one, but we'll see how that goes. So everybody stick around. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. We're not getting any younger. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton and Walter Koenig, two legends.
Hello.
All right. Hi. Here are the trivioids of the week. They go a little something like this. Captain Kirk had a conversation with a famous guitarist. Robert Johnson's thoughts were foggy and disjointed. Chekhov tells Kirk, you want to see a dead guy? Like in Stand By Me. You want to see a dead guy? Dr. Wallace is an expert on endocrinology. Lieutenant Galway is having trouble with her hearing. Bones has gray hair. Kirk has advanced arthritis. Scotty just needs a bit of rest. That's all. and the heart is not a logical organ. So yeah, Captain Kirk talking with a famous guitarist an hour prior to the episode was pretty cool. And that famous guitarist was Robert Johnson. I thought it was really cool that the guy's name was Robert Johnson, just like a very famous guitarist from like the 20s or something like that. One of the greatest guitarists in the history of humankind, but it was probably a different Robert Johnson. In fact, we saw him and we know he was very different than the guitarist, completely different complexion. But anyway, I guess that's just a very common name, but I still enjoyed that name, Robert Johnson. So here's what I wanted to ask you guys. The court hearing part, I thought it was really strange when the senior staff is hours, days away from dying, and every minute they're getting less and less coherent. So every minute is of huge importance. We need to figure this thing out quickly because our captain, our science officer, they're losing their wits, and they are the key to figuring this out. And then they stop everything to do a court hearing rather than just the Commodore outranks Captain Kirk. Commodore is in between captain and admiral. So the Commodore could just relieve him of duty. The doctor could just relieve him of duty and say he's unfit. But rather than doing that, they wanted to spend an hour of their time dragging him through the mud and proving that he's unfit. We don't have time for this. We've got to figure it out. Just relieve him of duty, make him an advisor, something, whatever. I don't know. Maybe that was me, but I thought that was a very tisk kind of move. What do you guys think?
Well, I think about. I thought that scene was a little bit carried on a little long, for the certain fact that they were actually repeating stuff that we had already seen earlier in the episode. Like, did the captain say this to you, and you said that, and this and that, and those were recaps of things we'd already seen. So if there was maybe something in those hearings that gave us information that we didn't know, then it would be better for me. But I felt like we knew everything that was already being discussed in those hearings, that his memory was slipping. What I did like was Shatner's performance in that scene, because I thought he was exceptional. How he played the room, how he delivered his kind of rebuttal, and how he was holding on to the certain level of hubris about himself. That was one thing that he was kind of reluctant to let go. But I almost felt like that Kirk should have come up with the decision himself to relieve himself, based on the fact that this is not. I'm not. He should have recognized his own slip in the tongue many times, his own memory issues, when he forgot that he had signed the protocol, and he had to be reminded that he actually signed off on those orders. So I feel like he should have came to that conclusion on his own, maybe even through a friendly conversation with Spock or somebody that he feels close with, like McCoy. As a buddy, he could have had that conversation. That would have worked more for me.
That's interesting because, that's precisely the thing that I liked. I liked that fallibility. I liked the fact that he has that scene with Spock where he says, you stabbed me in the back.
Mm-hmm.
That's what, whether every old person, and I don't know any old people.
Neither do we, Walter.
Yeah. But I thought that vulnerability, that, that beginning paranoia or whatever the hell it was, I thought that's what makes Star Trek at its best. It distinguishes it from other shows, is that they are willing to take that step and show our people in a not so good light, which could very well be part of the aging process. God knows, I'm I'm so freaking old now. I take exception to things that are probably not meant to be taken exception to, you know. But you get a sensitivity to being thought of as being less than in control, less than capable. So I thought that, wow, it's not seeing Captain Kirk at his proudest, but it's human, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, we weren't. I mean, you know, at the same time, we're showing him without his shirt on a lot. You know,
That's what I said.
Yeah. And
So-
having
Yeah.
a girlfriend a lot.
we're acknowledging the fact that he's our leading man, but I really like the idea that he's fallible and that he's deteriorating, and we see that in his behavior. And that's
Mhm.
what I mean when I say it really feels like a stage performance. I mean, something you really worked on, and you decided to dimensionalize the character you're playing and get the most out of it. So I was pleased. I was pleased with what he did.
You know, and not to put on the amateur typewriter hat again, but along those lines, you know, with the, you know, the, I don't know if it wasn't really a court martial, it was like a hearing or something like that. I thought that all of that stuff that was discussed, and, you know, as Sirach said, we heard it before, it showed a fallibility, as you mentioned, but I thought that time, whatever it was, 5 minutes or 6 minutes, would have been better served. Those same points could have been hit had the Commodore been making those points throughout the episode. If the Commodore corrected Kirk, said, actually, you said this, and then another scene he says, oh, shouldn't we be doing this? So that way it's like this building tension where the Commodore finally says, you know what? No, you're unfit and I can do it better. And then that would make the climax even bigger and better when it turns out, no, he can't do it better. And Kirk comes and shows him how difficult it really is to sit in that chair. I thought, because then that moment wasn't as big as it could have been had it been building up throughout the episode. But that was my thinking on that, was I didn't need that hearing. I could have used more of that storyline.
Yeah,
Walter, did you say you're wrong? I probably am, but you know, what do I know?
I'm conflicted, which is why I think this is a good subject matter. I think good subjects have arguments on both sides, and I think that's one of the things that leaves me slightly conflicted in this particular episode. On one hand, I I feel like there is a certain level of ageism that is being addressed in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Because we see it in government, for example. We see people in government that overstay their terms and have lost some ability to function on a high level, and that costs us as the constituents. That costs us something to some degree, and so there you've heard outcries for certain people to step aside based on their cognitive abilities or based on their age, essentially. And so I do think that that is an argument that happens in the real world. But I also think what wasn't addressed in this episode was the value that is brought. Now, I understand because this is a radiation caused aging effect, that it doesn't come with the life experience and wisdom that normal aging would cause.
Yeah.
But I do think that there is value in recognizing both, not in this particular subject matter, but in the argument of aging in general. There's value in somebody who's lived a long life and experienced different things over multiple set of decades and has wisdom to bring of life experience. But then there's also a decline of ability. And It's weighing out those two things, and I think that this episode kind of weighed those two things out to some degree. Without actually giving too much value to the age, to the people that are aged. Yeah.
Good point. Yeah, because the other side of that is that too often people are dismissed because of their age, whether it's too young or too old. And, as you're saying, people that are older, well, that comes with wisdom, that comes with life experience. They're the people that should be listened to the most in a lot of cases. Now, that's not something that would have worked in this episode, as you said, because they became old in one day rather than in
Right.
50 years. I also thought it was funny that they were like, oh my God, Captain Kirk is so old. The computer says he's in his 60s.
Yeah, now that was
I was
crazy
like,
to me.
whoa, man, things have changed since 1967 because a 60-year-old is totally fine nowadays.
I did like that they had Kirk sleep at the chair. I thought that William Shatner gave a fantastic performance in this episode. Speaking to what Walter said, I think he was vulnerable in a way in which he showed uh, some level of vulnerability. And what I really enjoyed writing wise from the David Harmon was the callback. And I love these kinds of callbacks in writing, the code 2, code 3 callback. So early in this episode, we see the code 2, code 3 analogy discussion between Uhura and Kirk, in which she says the Romulans cracked that code. You should have, we're on code 3 now, and he kind of brushed it off. But then the reinvigorated Kirk comes back and uses that same code 2 to be part of the solution of the story, which I thought that's also great writing for me, is when you have those kinds of callbacks.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Walter, here's something I wanted to ask you too, is that you kind of got the opportunity to show off a little bit in this episode. There was a moment when they said, oh, why don't you hop onto this medical bed? And you didn't just sit on it. You did a pickup. You picked your body up, and dropped yourself, almost showing off like, hey, I'm the young, spry one. Do you remember doing that? Do you remember showing off your muscles?
No, I don't. But I noticed it when I was watching it. Jesus, it's been a while since I was able to do that. And, no, it was a fun episode to do. We did I was recruited to do a fan version, a sequel to Deadly Years, and I went out to Ticonderoga, New York, to shoot this. And
Phase 2, right? Phase 2, New Voyages in Ticonderoga.
Yeah, Dorothy Fontana wrote it. I recruited her to write it, and she did. And just incidentally, when I said I would do it, I said the only condition I would do it is if Chekhov dies in this sequel, because I knew he was going to become ill. He was going to age. And I said, and I think he needs to die. I thought we were done. I thought we were never going to do any more Star Trek. It was one of those false starts that I kept making. In any case, they reluctantly said, okay, you'll die. So, and we had a death scene, and we shot it, and I thought it was fine. And the fans really were upset. They were so freaking upset. And they came to me, hat in the hand, please, can we save Chekhov's life, please? Well, I had the experience of him dying. Okay, so, and this is, after all, science fiction. And I said, okay, if it's that important, if because it violates canon, because we know that Chekhov lived on and on and on. Okay, you really want to make it all a dream? That's okay. Okay. I've had my moment. I got what I wanted out of it. So, and it's the most ridiculous ending of all time. But that's what finally went out for the fans to see the second time around, was Chekhov surviving.
They saved your life.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration behind that? Behind making a sequel to this episode?
I'm sorry, what was that?
What was the inspiration behind making a sequel to this particular episode?
It's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't. A friend of mine who's an English fan, I think, suggested it, and they assumed that ultimately I would be okay with it, But that was the condition on which I did it, was that he's got to die. Who knew? Who knew that 50 years later, 50
Wow.
years later, 60 years later, people were still talking about Star Trek, and still, can you see this cat?
Yeah,
I just
Grinnell.
Yeah.
I got this in the mail about 3 days ago. It's from a fan who lives in Iowa, who went to the college campus and found this hat and bought it and mailed it to me, because I went to Grinnell for 2 years. So yeah, we've certainly outlived our anticipated lifespan.
Yeah.
So I guess you can't kill these characters off just because you want to,
Definitely outlived its life expectancy. Walter, there was one more question I wanted to ask you. You had, in a way, I guess it's technically a monologue, when you came back onto the bridge and you were muttering to yourself, take this sample, take that sample, pee into this, poop into that, or whatever you were saying, which was a lot of fun. And it was one of the biggest moments we've had for Chekhov so far, because you had the most lines in a row. You're kind of going up and down. You get to show off a little bit of like comedy, and you're doing your Elvis lip curl that Chekhov does every once in a while. Do you remember doing that? Was that fun? Did you do it do a bunch of takes? Do you remember anything about that? It was fun. It's fun to watch.
I do remember doing that, and you're right. It was one of the first times that Chekhov actually got to be a human being, a dimensional human being, and not simply somebody who is observing the action and relating what he's seeing, which anybody could do. So no, I do remember that. And in fact, I didn't really add any lines, but I sort of elaborated on a couple of the sentences. Something about if I live long enough, and that was my input was involved in that. So no, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm not going through withdrawal here, guys. I do not take drugs. My eyes are itching, and I don't understand why. So,
mine too. I think it's allergies. I think we've got the warmer weather. It's turning into March, so I think I'm getting the allergies too.
As long as you understand that I'm not
You're just clawing your eyes out. Well, tell you what, guys, it's just about time for the home run of the episode. Sirach Lofton, who gets the home run of today's episode?
I thought that the home run should go to William Shatner in this episode. He carried a lot of it, and he gave us a full range of of Kirk. I mean, there was a lot of different Kirks. And one thing that was great about his performance was when he finally did take that adrenaline at the end and walked into the bridge with, that confidence that he had. The contrast couldn't be any more stark between who he was and who he became after he went back to his original self, which just lends to how great his performance was. So I'm going to say William Shatner deserves the home run.
What about yourself, Walter Koenig? It's just about preseason baseball right now is starting. Who gets the home run of today's episode?
It's interesting. When I was watching the beginning of the episode, and he sort of comes on a little bit to the young actress, and I'm thinking, why am I imagining this, or is he in a kind of a playful way? And yes, he was coming on to her to help show the progression of what happens to him. How he goes from his, rakish, charming self to this grumpy guy. And so that was part of the character. And, and he established that right from the very beginning. And I thought, good for him, because it was not terribly appropriate. It wasn't so gross, embarrass you, but you could see Captain Kirk at work there. And then we deteriorate. So good for him. I thought that was part of his design when the character was evolving in his head. So yes, I agree with Sirach. I think kudos should go to Bill Shatner.
So I say this was kind of a tougher one for me. I'm going to go with the director, Mr. Pevney, because there were good shots. I was kind of poking holes in the script a little bit. That's all just opinion. It's very subjective. But the directing, as far as I could see, was well done. I thought the music was beautiful. That's not him, obviously. That's the composer. But I thought that, he does have a say in what goes where. And just all around, I just felt like it was a really well-directed episode in that it was tight. It was clean. Everything kind of worked for me as far as how it was delivered. Secondarily, I want to give a shout out to Chekhov, because we got to see more of Chekhov. He got to do kind of a backwards push-up on the bed. He got to mutter to himself. He got to be the one guy that doesn't age, which is kind of true today still. So also a shout out, at least a triple for Chekhov. All right. So that's it for us, everybody. We've got the free-for-all up next, so there's still more to enjoy in just a moment. But before we go over to the free-for-all, we'd like to give a shout-out to these ageless wonders. Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom, TJ Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Titus Muller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Anil O. Palat, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, and Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foles, a.k.a. Crewman Guy, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manasfi, Jed Thompson, Dr. Susan V. Gruner, Glenn Iverson, Dave Gregory, Chris Sternett, that guy hooks up some pretty good wine, Greg K. Wickstrom out in Hawaii, Cassandra Gerard, cool name, Chuck A., Chris Garris, and of course, Jason Oken. All right, everybody. Yes?
Ryan, can I shamelessly
Yes.
something while we still have the audience with us?
Yeah.
And I admit it's a shameless promotion. I'm involved with a short film that my writer director friend Frank Krim has brought to me, and I think it's one of the most challenging parts I've done on screen on film, and I'm not going to go into detail. I just would like your fans to look for information about it and if they are so inclined to help us. That's as much as I'm going to say.
Absolutely. What's it called?
Fleischman, and it's a very significant 25 minutes. And if I'm going to go out, I'm not if I'm going to go out. God knows I am going out. But if this will be the last thing I do, I would be very proud to have done it. So look for it. It's called Mr. Fleischman. We probably can use some help. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
Mr. Fleischman. All right, well, we'll check that out. We'll see if we can include a link in the description box below for people to click on and find it and support. All right, everybody, stick around. Thanks, Walter, for pointing that out for all of us, because we do want more Walter Koenig. So you're not doing yourself a favor. You're doing us a favor. Stick around, everybody. We got the free-for-all up next. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton and Walter Koenig. This is the free-for-all with Melissa Longo wearing everybody's favorite shirt.
It's a Jack.
Excellent. And Jason M. Oken wearing a sweatshirt, looks like.
Everybody.
Allison Leach Hyde has very cute puppies.
Yay!
If we're lucky, we may get to see one or two of them. No, they're not around. They're already gone. They'll be back. Chris Garris is here with a cool background.
Hello.
Chuck A. always has his radical pictures behind him.
Hello.
And Chris McGee is being coy, hiding half of what his shirt says. It's weird being the same age as old people.
I figured it was appropriate.
Yeah. All right. Jake Sisko guesses the IMDb score.
The years, I would say this was probably around a 7-3.
Interesting guess. Interesting. Does anybody else have any guesses that doesn't already know what this score got from all of the voters on IMDb?
Probably
about
close.
7.5.
Yeah, that's something.
I would have said 7.5 too.
Yep.
So we have 3 7.5s and a 7.3. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Do you have the $100 bill that Bob Barker always had for the one that got it right?
Right.
Yeah.
It is a 7.3, Cirroc Lofton. Look at you.
Oh, wow.
I know. I know. There's 100. Reach into my pocket, he used to say. Like, what the? That did not age well, actually. That move. Anyway. All right. Did we get any non-appearance mentions? I didn't hear any. Or any some kinds of or some sorts of?
Afraid not.
All right. That's what somebody said to the string that got all ruffled. Afraid not? Okay.
It's funny.
Thank you, Melissa. Save us. Can you please get us started off on the right track by telling us what this episode, or if you enjoyed this episode, just go ahead, please.
You've got all the dad jokes ready to go.
I'm down the dead jokes. They're not getting anywhere.
Yes, I did. Yes. Going into it, I was very excited because I thought the premise was interesting and it held my attention. It was, but the episode overall was a mixed bag for me. And for one particular reason, and it's because of the trial that was thrown in the middle of, of the episode. It was going along great, and then there's a trial, and I think they could have maybe gone a different route with that. But overall, I thought it was a pretty decent episode. The acting was good. I enjoyed it overall. My favorite scene, however, I have to read to you, and I'm not going to use a Russian accent, but But it's when Chekhov says, "Give more blood, Chekhov. The needle won't hurt, Chekhov. Take off your shirt, Chekhov. Roll over, Chekhov. Breathe deeply, Chekhov. Blood sample, Chekhov. Marrow sample, Chekhov." And he keeps going. And then Sulu says, "You'll live." And Chekhov says, "Oh, yes, I'll live, but I won't enjoy it." I love that.
Nice.
It was great. Great moment. Yeah, it's so, those are my thoughts. I have a lot of things left unsaid, but those are my thoughts for now.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you, Melissa Longo. All right. Jason M. Oken is here. He always has thoughts and he has information. What'd you think of this one?
Well, thoughts and thoughts. I've always liked this episode. There's certainly, as Melissa said, a lot to say, and it's hard to sort of package it in a few things. I mean, is it the most believable story? Perhaps not. Even Gene Roddenberry, I believe, early on in the script process, questioned the believability of aging in 72 hours in The Cure. But if it's done right, if you care about the characters, if it comes off pretty well, and you can ignore that. Star Trek tried to do something similar in Next Gen twice with unnatural selection and to some degree in too short a season, and pretty much failed because you have to care about the characters. You have to construct the right story. And here we have things for a lot of different characters to do. Perhaps maybe Sulu didn't get as much as the other characters, but obviously we have scenes for Uhura, we have scenes for Chekhov, and I think this, to some degree, from at least what I've read, DC Fontana was responsible for some of that, because I think originally Chekhov had 3 scenes and about 10 lines of dialogue. So a lot more got added to Chekhov because of that. But overall, I think it certainly moves along very fast. I do have things to say about the trial or the hearing. Some of the way it was conducted with Spock doing the questioning was actually Leonard Nimoy's letter or memo that he wrote to the production staff to have him question Kirk instead of the Commodore, which was that's the way it was originally intended, to give a little bit more conflict to the situation. So I think it worked really well. In overall, I think it's certainly something I always enjoy watching. So again, kudos to the way it came out. I think it was very well directed, certainly well acted, and the makeup for the time was also very good. Again, there are a lot of different things to say, and I'll save most of them for later.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you very much. Jason M. Oken. Don't forget the M, he says. Allison Leach Hyde is here. What's up, Allison? What do you think of this one?
I like this one because there's a good sprinkling of humor throughout it. Chekhov is hysterical. That little scene with Sulu that Melissa mentioned is like the best part of the episode for me. I also enjoy Uhura a lot when the Commodore went, "Let me know when we contact the Romulans," and then they get shot, and she's like, "I think we've been contacted by the Romulans, sir." Yes. So love that little bit. What gets me about this episode, though, is that Kirk's a good captain. He would know he was going to be compromised for being too old. So I don't understand why we have that whole bit of this being a thing. I know it's actually to have a story and have an episode, but I'm like, would he really go this whole time going, "Oh, wait, I'm actually medically compromised. I can't command this ship"? Like, Kirk's a good captain, so I don't think that would be an issue. But I would love to say that Shatner did a wonderful job of portraying someone who is losing their memory. I went through this with multiple grandparents, and he did a wonderful job, because that whole thing of when you stop, for some people, it feels like the world is just gone crazy, and they're not listening. Like, how could you not be here with me or understand what I'm saying? And they do get angry about it. And so I thought he did a lovely job with that portrayal. So yeah, I think everyone did a great job too. I mean, DeForest Kelley is hysterical, and being his grumpy country doctor and getting grumpier and grumpier as the episode goes along. So I really do like it. I thought it was done well, but I do think that Kirk would have went like, no, wait, I'm not good to command right now. I need to have somebody else do this while this is being taken care of. So that's where I'm at.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Allison Leach Hyde in beautiful New Mexico. All right, everybody. Speaking of beautiful, Chris Garris is here in beautiful Southeast Texas. What do you got for us today, Chris?
So this is actually my first time to see this episode, and I'd never seen it, and I actually enjoyed it overall. I mean, it really was funny. I mean, Bones' whole character of the old country doctor he's already crotchety as it is, and he just gets even more, and it just actually was funny. And then especially when he goes, okay, Spock, I've got a more potent shot for you, and I've taken everything out of there that's breakable. And I thought that was hilarious. And also Chekhov's scene on the bridge, he's like he was just a lab rat, and he was like, he didn't like it, but he survived. Yeah, I have to admit the trial they threw it in there, but I really do think, I don't know, I hate to say it, I feel like Kirk is hard-headed enough and stubborn enough that he would not want to give up command, even if he knew he needed to give it up. I don't know. I just feel like he's got that in him. But it was a good episode. And of course, I think within like the first 5 minutes of it, I was like, okay, I've already seen this once. This was an unnatural selection in TNG. And so, right. But I went and verified that before. I was like, yep, that's what it was. And so, but still, I think I have to give Jason, I think this was a much better version of unnatural selection, because I actually care about these characters. But other than that, I have a few things to say and things left unsaid, but it was just an enjoyable episode that, Kirk got his shirt off like he always does in some way. And then the other parts that go with that, I'm going to save for later. But no, for a first time watching it, I enjoyed it. And it wasn't even hard to watch. Some of them are hard to watch. This one was just good to go, had a laugh, and you knew they were going to figure it out. But, that's all I have for here.
Yeah. It was my first time too, and Srock's first time, I believe. Walter had seen it before, but a different version, which is pretty interesting. All right, Chuck A is here, if you can believe it. Thanks for hanging out with us, Chuck. What do you think of this one?
Well, I really enjoyed this episode. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but Walter was fantastic, and it would, like everybody said in the bridge scene with the give more blood, check off, and all that. I did like the one part where towards the end, where when Kirk gets back onto the bridge and he uses the Corbomite maneuver tactic that they used in season 1. I thought that was great. Commodore Stalker really had no idea what to do with the Romulan situation, and Kirk came to the rescue. I agree with what was said about that Kirk wouldn't necessarily act that way, even though he was aged and had some memory issues. I did like the last line where he says about steady as she goes, and says, "I thought I said that." They used a lot of humor at the end, but this I thought was really well done. Walter, you were really good on a lot of the scenes. We got to hear you scream again at the beginning of the episode. You made that famous later on more. And it's a shame that George didn't have more scenes. That one scene he had with Chekhov on the bridge was really good. A lot of times we say that the TOS episodes don't age well, but this really aged well for the reasons we saw. But like I said, it was quite a few years since I had seen it, so I enjoyed seeing it again. Really thought it was one of the better episodes that they did in the second season.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you bring up a great point, Chuck A. Everybody knows about the Wilhelm scream. We should have a Walter scream in every movie too. That would be pretty awesome. The Walter scream snuck into Lower Decks or on when Chewbacca is shooting something, it'd be pretty fun. Anyway, all right, Chris McGee, the Dark Lord, is here. He has words on his shirt. What do you think of this one?
Well, I rather enjoy this episode, like most of you, even despite my minor nitpick, which I'll get to in a moment. Ooh. In fact, you could say that this is probably one of the iconic episodes of the original series. Fun fact, if it hasn't already been mentioned in the previous segment, the star system to which this planet belongs, Gamma Hydra, is the same one in the Kobayashi Maru training scene in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. As Chris Guerra said, we see Shatner shirtless once again when he strains his lower back. At this point, I think it must be in his contract. Although, as Chuck mentioned, I did appreciate him reusing the Corbomite maneuver once again to trick the Romulans. And I'm not sure, but I think this might be the first episode where we learn that Vulcans have a much longer lifespan than humans. I'm not certain of that, but at any rate, it explains why Spock was still alive during the Next Generation era in Unification 1 and 2, which, of course, we just recently reviewed. I liked Commodore Stalker, played very well by Charles Drake. He's probably our first visiting dignitary who isn't a total... Yeah, you know what I'm about to say. He's not copacetic either, but at least he's soft-spoken, logical, praises Kirk, and does what he thinks is best for the ship. Unlike some other dignitaries we've seen on the show who are demanding, egotistical, or downright nuts. The minor nitpick mirrors what others have said. The competency hearing feels a little bit to me like it's an unnecessary tangent to the main plot, just rehashing the events we've already seen. Despite that, I do appreciate that the characters in the scene were well acted, either verbally or through their physical acting and facial expressions, clearly conveying that they don't want to be there and speak against their captain. For the memorable quote, everyone already knows my most memorable quote, so I'll go with a secondary one that I like too, which was Lieutenant Galway saying, "That's a stupid place to hang a mirror."
We've all thought it. Thanks very much, Dark Lord Chris McGee. All right. It is time for Jake's final take. Any final thoughts on this episode, Strzok?
Just a couple. One of them was Commodore Stalker's urgency to get to Starbase 10 did not seem relevant given the nature of the circumstances they were currently dealing with. As soon as he took command, he was like, all right, let's get to Starbase 10. I'm like, there should be more urgency on the thing that we have at hand. We literally have a countdown to death with the whole senior crew, and he kept wanting to get to Starbase 80 before they close or something, or Starbase 10. And I'm like, bro, it's not that serious. Let's focus on the thing in the hand, which led to some of his lack of decision making skills to me, which showed themselves to be true when the Romulans showed up. Number two was I noticed that Bones wears a pinky ring. I think it might have been the first time I noticed it, but I just saw that pinky ring, and I thought, how cool is that, right? I felt like my favorite line in the episode was delivered by Spock. I think Leonard Nimoy had the best line, and the line was, "We have no more questions, Captain." And the way he said that, we all kind of knew it at the same time. Like, yeah, you're answering all our questions, So I thought that was a very well delivered line by Leonard Nimoy. And last but not least, I'm going to say that I probably felt the same way as everyone else did when they first saw the woman in the blue dress beaming up on the planet's surface. Like, what's going to happen to her? And so,
yes.
Yeah. Usually it's the black guy, but today it was this woman, and I was like, oh, she's gonna, even though she wasn't in a red shirt, it was a blue dress. I still felt, I felt the feeling. I was like, it's not gonna end well for you. What because they never just bring some rando along for a mission, and it's always gonna end well for whoever that person is. So sorry, Yeoman Atkins, you had to be the red shirt in a blue dress.
Mm-hmm. She was matching the devil, everybody knows. Interesting observations, Sirach. So,
Wow.
Walter, do you have any final thoughts on this episode?
Oh, Pinky Brain.
Walter Koenig?
Yes.
Do you have any final thoughts on this episode before we go?
I don't know. I gave my final thoughts right at the beginning. And nothing cogent, perceptive, extraordinary to add at this juncture. And I'm trying to keep myself awake is what I'm really trying to do.
Everybody at home, it's very late here in LA. You may not know this, but it's very late in the day and we all have allergies. Please continue, Walter.
Suspension of what's the term? Suspension
Disbelief.
Disbelief, yeah. You go in with that and then you accept that, and then everything else is just sit back and relax and enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Obviously there's some logic that might be challenged, but it was fun. I enjoyed doing it. I had a good time. So that's what I took away.
And we loved watching your role in this episode, by the way. We were talking earlier about how much Walter showed off when he jumped onto the bed and he was like pushing himself up. I watched it like 5 times, looking at his triceps. Anyway, great stuff.
7 years ago.
That was a while ago, but you could still do it.
7 years ago.
All right, everybody. Let's say thank you to Chris McGee, Chuck A, aka TNG Fanatic, Chris Garris out in Texas, Allison Leach Hyde with the cool dogs that she's keeping from us, Jason M. Oken, Melissa Longo, for myself, Walter Sirach, Aaron Eisenberg, and Melissa Longo. Thank you all very much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. And we can't wait to see you next time. Until then, always remember the 7th rule.